way out is through. And there's no other way, actually. The way out is only through. You cannot distract forever. And life has this fierce grace where it will show you all of the painful things in your life just through circumstances until you learn to let go of that certain thing. It's a concept and a label. When you realize that I've created a life, you have to create a death. It's a duality. And it's like when I create an up, when I say there is an up, I've actually simultaneously created a down. When I've created an inside, I've simultaneously created an outside. And this is just a mechanism of how the mind works.
Hello, and welcome back to the Mindful Evolution Podcast. I am Leah Drew, your host, and today I am super excited to introduce you to my guest. Today I have Ben Duffy with me on the podcast, and Ben is a Naropa graduate student who has an extensive background in meditation. Ben is actually a new friend of mine. And we both share a common interest around psychedelics as healing medicine. Mm-hmm. And the more that Ben and I have gotten to know each other, the deeper we've dove into conversations that have left me thinking, damn, we should be recording this.
For sure.
So here we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ben, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. You and I recently connected over the last couple of weeks. What is it, 4 weeks ago now?
Yeah.
And we met in a very unique way.
Mm-hmm. It's a funny story. You want to say it?
You go. I want to hear from you.
Okay, so basically we were both going to a music festival called Arcadia in Las Vegas, and we had actually matched on the dating app Hinge a few weeks before we started talking. And Leah was like, do you have any fun plans for the weekend? I was like, I'm actually going to a music festival. And she was like, no way, are you going to Arcadia? And I was like, yeah. So we basically met on Hinge, linked up at Arcadia. She introduced me to her whole squad, which is full of amazing people. And again, we had just an amazing time, crazy conversations. And yeah, just one of those serendipitous, kind of synchronous sort of happenings. I don't know, it feels like it was kind of meant to be. It was just like all the connections and insights and depth we got out of that. So definitely a unique way of meeting you, but I am, so thankful.
Super thankful. Yeah, it was probably one of the most unique ways I've met anyone off of a dating app before. Yeah. What's super funny too is I remember a couple of weeks prior, I was at Dushanbe, a place that you work, and I remember sitting at the bar and I saw you there. And I was like, who is this human? Like, you know when you can see someone and you can kind of either like see that they're on your same frequency or feel their energy and you're just like, who the hell is that? Like, I want to know that person. I remember feeling and experiencing that. I didn't say anything to you. And then I think it was like the day before Arcadia that you and I actually dropped into conversation on the dating app. And then fast forward and we met up at Arcadia, and it was kind of history from there. And you just like came right into our crew, like dropped right into the community. Everyone loves you.
Oh.
And
That's so
sweet. And we had such an epic week there.
It was amazing. It was the best festival I've ever been to. The connection, insights, lessons, synchronicities is very crazy. But yeah, that is interesting. I think, again, with my whole worldview now, which we will get into definitely, there's a kind of there's meaning in all of that. So when you're picking up on that, there's a reason for that. And I don't know, also like maybe something was telling you, oh, maybe you'll have some sort of relationship with this guy later on. He's a familiar face you don't yet know. So interesting happenings.
Yeah, like who is this human? Which is so interesting. And right, I feel like that whole first 24 hours of meeting you was kind of like feeling out like, what the fuck is this? Like, who is
Totally.
like, who is this human being who's now
Hmm.
staying in our
Hmm. Hmm.
Airbnb and
Hmm.
hanging with my friends?
Totally.
And I just met him on a dating app, right?
Yep. Yep.
And it brought up so many questions for me where I'm like, am I interested in this person? Like, all my friends are pretty humans. You're pretty human.
Hmm.
Like, I'm like, what is this? Right. And then
Mm,
there's the
mm,
conditioning of, well, you meet someone on a dating app. And so
hmm.
you enter into relating usually through this lens of, oh, is this person going to date me, or am I going to
Totally.
date this person?
Hmm. Hmm.
And what was really beautiful was that you and I ended up dropping into a conversation, I don't know, like 12 hours after we met or something, like the
Hmm.
following morning. And in that conversation, it just kind of became really clear to me that, like, we're in different spaces looking for different things. And I was like, awesome, this is a dope human. Great, we're friends.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that conversation also gave me insight into your world and some of the things that you were
Hmm.
navigating.
Hmm.
And one of
Hmm.
the things you said to me was around your deep desire and mission right now to, as you said, re-enchant your relationship to the world around
Ooh,
you.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm
That's
really
a
curious, like, what does that mean to you?
wow. So, that's like obviously, like I said, it's a huge part of my life, and my spiritual progression. I do have a really like intense background in meditation and Buddhism. I stayed in an ashram in India, and then at various Zen centers for about a year total, which is a very intense practice with meditation in particular, and realized what comes out of that for me at least, and I think for everybody, is this desire to connect and to connect with yourself deeply and intimately, others, and also the world. And with learning from different Dharma teachers, one guy in particular, his name is Robert Bea. He just passed away a few years ago, but that's the focal point of his teachings is basically how do we re-enchant this world to make our experience something other than what is culturally conditioned in the world today, especially in the West. I found it's a combination of scientific reductionist materialism, those three words in particular. So we believe in science as though it's our God. It's our God right now in one lens. Materialism, like matter is real and the imagination is not real. And reductionist in that we're saying that this is objectively how it is. There's no other way of seeing it. And when I experience that, you can feel it. And I can feel it come on sometimes, and it feels like a cage. It feels like, oh, this world is dead. The trees, the clouds, the rivers, they have nothing to tell me. They're just dead, lifeless matter, just molecules floating around. It's all random. I don't have a direct relationship to it. And I'm also, by default, random in this world. And in a sense, kind of lifeless. And there's that soul element that's missing. And through my practice, I found it just kind of incorporating, I guess you could call it more indigenous ways of relating to the world that are kind of have existed all around the world in various traditions, and that we have disconnected ourselves from in a lot of ways. And basically, so my practice now is like I heard this quote, for instance, that's like when you step out in the morning and the breeze hits your face, it has something to say to you. And
Hmm.
are we open to hearing what it has to say? Are we re-enchanting that and opening up the potential and the real experience of having a relationship to that, to the wind, to the clouds, to the sunsets, to the mountains? Um, what are they telling us? Not just telling us, can I be connected to them? When I look at the moon, for instance, I actually went through this period that was pretty hard recently, just as kind of coming back to reality, just the standard school work, all that, coming down from that high of Arcadia, and I just was crying for like 3 hours. And I remember looking at the moon and saying, "That's the same moon that's seen me highs and lows back when I was traveling in India." I remember looking at the moon and having that same experience, and realizing that it's got my back in a sense. It's seen me. It's holding me. The earth is holding me too. And when I have that kind of connection, which is cultivatable, it's not that you have it or you don't. It's like a practice, just like meditation or exercise. It's a practice. And when you start to use that muscle, when you're working the muscle of soul, you start to build a real connection with these things, with the world around you, with the place you're living in, with the people in it too, obviously. And that is so deeply nourishing, realizing I'm not alone. these things are alive and they have something to tell me. And so that's a big part of my process. And what's also involved in that is narratives and the stories we're telling ourselves. Obviously, with materialism, it's pretty limited in a lot of ways. It's just matter, molecules, whatever science wants to say. And I'm not saying that doesn't have a place. Of course it does. And it's so useful in so many ways. But the problem with it for me is I think when most people take it to be objectively true, like there is, again, in a reductionist sort of lens, it's the only reality. We're cutting ourselves off from the potential to re-enchant this existence into something that is so deeply meaningful, because we've lost a lot of that meaning. And you see that manifesting, I think, in huge mental health crises at the level of the individual, at the level of society and the collective human psyche, especially in the West. So
Big
yeah,
time.
that's part of the work that I want to do. And it's complex, and we can get into that too. Again, using things like psychedelics to open you up to those experiences, to become more sensitive, to maybe see how this reductionist materialist view is impacting me, how it feels like a cage, and asking the question, is this objective reality? And I'm getting chills saying this because that's the biggest part. I'm not trying to convince anybody, but it's asking the question and then feeling into your soul, with your spirit, the deepest parts of yourself, saying, what do I want to feel? And saying, maybe, the idea of needing an objective reality is in itself the cage that has been trapping me. And if I can see through that and open up to very different ways of seeing things, then how does that impact me? How do I feel it in my body? And knowing the intelligence that's in the body and listening, giving more, I guess, power to the body and what it knows, as opposed to my mind and what all the logic can say. It's like, oh well, they proved this, and the scientists say this, so thus it must be true objectively. But how does your body feel?
Mm.
And
Your body
so
has so much wisdom.
absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, I think that's a huge part of the work. But it's very, again, complex, because in my mind too, the body, although it has all of so much intelligence, deep knowings beyond the logical mind, it also is where the trauma of life is held. It's held in the body. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, where you get to, if you're in the body, you are tapping into that intelligence, but you're also tapping into all that pain and that intensity from a lifetime of traumatic experiences and ways of seeing yourself in the world. And this is very culturally conditioned, and intergenerational trauma, affects us too. So it's hard work. It's not easy, and it's it's extremely difficult, but at the same time, probably the most rewarding thing I've found that you can do is tapping into that intuition in the body. But then, yeah, realizing how difficult it is part of the path too.
And it takes practice. Like,
Hmm.
it takes practice like a muscle. You get to build strength with it. And
Hmm.
one of the things I'm hearing is like through this introspection, you get to find more connection within
Hmm.
yourself,
Hmm.
to your
Hmm.
body, to
Hmm.
your thoughts, to your
Hmm.
stories, to your beliefs, to
Hmm.
all that which lives within you,
Hmm.
right? And through that, you actually get to re-enchant your relationship to the world around you because of that deeper connection, which is,
Totally.
in my experience and in my opinion, the deeper you go within, the more you can connect and expand without, right, around you,
Totally.
as within, so
Totally.
without.
Hmm.
And that's a
Totally.
lot of what I'm hearing from you is like through this journey of going deeper within you and re-enchanting your relationship to your mind, to your body, to the wisdom within, that you're actually able to connect more with the world around
Yeah.
you.
Yep. Yep. And like you said, so this re-enchantment goes in every direction. It's not just the world that I experience. It also comes to myself. What is the narrative that is a lot of the time unconsciously playing in my mind of what I am, who I am? So as far as like who I am, we have these stories that are linked to this solid objective belief of who I am, the stories behind me. And when they're solid like that, they're hard to change. And there was points in my life through meditation and experience with psychedelics where I could open up to those narratives, see them clearly, and start to choose, who do I want to be? What is the story I'm telling myself about? For instance, the trauma in my past, the trauma that happened to me in my family dynamics, the trauma that happened to me culturally, being bullied in elementary school? Am I holding a victim mentality? And if so, why? And how does that feel in the body? Or do I start to own it, see that pain, those difficulties, those traumas, honestly, as lessons and as messages and as essential pieces that were necessary to make me who I am today? This is a shift in the narrative that we're saying that also has an unbelievable impact on our experience. I heard actually on an Aubrey Marcus podcast once, he was talking about a shaman who had this quote. He said, it's never too late to have a good childhood. And I love that quote because a lot of the times we see our lives, we see the traumas in them, and we think this is just objectively how it is. I'm just a hurt person forever because of this. And interestingly, when we can tap into that pain, listen to the messages, we start to be able to change these narratives and these stories in a way that is empowering and gives us agency. And for instance, maybe, hey, I was hurt in the past, but I was able to rise to the occasion and overcome those difficulties. And how does that impact the system? Listening again, what is the body saying? Does that give you a sense of strength, a sense of like some ground to stand on, instead of always, maybe giving our power away to our past? And just these little tweaks in the narratives that are unconsciously playing for the most part, and how that changes our experience.
I love that you're saying that. One, love the quote that you're talking about, that it's never too late to have a good childhood, because it's not. You get to reparent yourself. You get to show up. You get to support yourself in the ways that you maybe weren't supported and that you needed as a child, so that that wound is not continuously open in your adult life, right? And actually today I had my last call with one of my one-on-one clients, and I just love this woman. She's 65 years old. And in the last 6 months, she's just come so far. We are in our first couple of sessions together. I couldn't say hello to her without just the waterworks, just the tears, right? And I would tell her, like, allow it to be, like, welcome it. It's here because it needs to move. And in our conversation today, one of the things that she shared with me was this stark difference between working together with me in comparison to being in some of the experiences with therapy that she's had in the past. And there are great therapists out there. So if you're listening to this, please make sure that you're not taking that the wrong way. But one of the things that she said was, in her past experiences, a lot of the therapists that she has worked with, they just kept replaying the story for her over and over and over and over again. And it led her to this place where her past continued to take her power away from her. And that's where she met me, in this place where she felt so powerless. And today she's sitting here, and I was like, what's your biggest takeaway from this experience? And she goes, that I am powerful as fuck. And I'm like, wow. Yes, queen. Right? But she said it's the work that I did with you and the ability to hear your reflections, be invited into a different perspective, and then apply the tools that I've learned and that I've talked about, so that she was able to shift the narrative, to shift the story, to shift the perspective, so that she's no longer living in this place where that old story is replaying and the body's trying to keep itself safe, which is therefore keeping it in that state of fight or flight, right?
That's an amazing story, yeah.
But it was so cool to watch that, like, shift in her, and just hearing the differences in her mind around her past with therapy. Because I do think a lot of people go to therapy and they get very basic as fuck therapy that leads them to just continue ruminating on those stories. And it's unfortunate.
It is. And so there are, I think, again, from my perspective, I'm in a therapy program officially, but I think that Western psychotherapy is limited in a lot of ways of what it is willing to approach. And when there are, for instance, circumstances in somebody's life in their past that is traumatic and it invokes kind of recurring patterns in somebody, we work with maybe those patterns, but it depends on the style of therapy, but some will not address the underlying narrative. And this is where something like Buddhism and meditation can be so helpful, because a key point of Buddhism is this understanding of emptiness, which is basically saying it's kind of complex to fully get into, but it's saying your experience of the world is completely fabricated. There is no solid objective reality that is independent from you. You are creating that. And when you realize that, it gives you some agency. And again, these stories that seem so solid, and when I say solid, like they're unchangeable, they just happen to me. That is a myth. In Buddhism, that's what they preach. And basically, when you hold that view, you can go into those narratives and start to actually change how we're viewing them. And like you said, and like with this client, it had a huge impact on their lives. And for me, that goes so deep. It goes at the level of my personal story of my life. And obviously, the traumas, the highs and the lows. What is the narrative I'm telling myself about this? But it also goes at maybe a wider lens. What is the narrative that I have about what is going on right now? This thing that we call life. What is it? At the end of the day, because nobody can tell you with certainty. Nobody can tell you. But yet we have this sort of solid belief that we know what's going on. And this is rooted in the human psyche's deep desire to find some solidity. Because we feel when we're in this free fall of not knowing, of emptiness, which is also, you can call it boundlessness. It's eternity and infinite also. So in this boundlessness, the human mind can become, I guess, uncomfortable. So we look for that solidity and look to things like dogmatic religion or science to give us some ground to stand on because we're uncomfortable with that groundlessness. But what's interesting is it's not the groundlessness that I found in my experience, at least. It's not the groundlessness that is uncomfortable. It is my relationship to the groundlessness. When I'm saying that I don't like it, I don't like this feeling, I want some solidity, I'm that resistance is creating an experience that is painful. I want to be somewhere other than where I am. And in Buddhism, they're preaching reality is groundless. It's whatever you make it. And when you can have an ability to be with that, you start to get so much agency in your life and your narrative. So again, what's going on in this world right now? What's going on um, as far as like the existential crises in the world? What is the narrative we're giving to it? Are these messages? Are these kind of prompting us to change ourselves and how we're viewing things? Am I just this body? You know, in Buddhism and with psychedelics, they will show you maybe they'll give you some insights. I am not just this body, and can I hold that without falling back into the culturally conditioned belief that nope, I actually am just this body. I was just tripping. That's a common thing that happens. But when you understand this groundlessness, you realize I can make it anything I want. And that comes into the re-enchantment work of listening to your soul, knowing for me that we are all God incarnate. We are all God manifest. And God is seeing a different world through every pair of eyes. And our soul, our unique soul that is in us, I don't mean that in a dogmatic sort of Christian sense, but our own personality at the deepest levels. What does that want to experience in this place? What stories do we want to tell ourselves? Because I can tell myself that I am just this mind and body. Ben will be dust someday, and then that's it. And that's a story that you can hold. And it's just as real as any other. But how does it feel in your body? To me, it felt very limited. And I can tell myself, you know, I am just this body at one sense, but in another sense, I'm also deathless. I am everything around me. Like I've said, the same seer that has seen my life through my eyes is the exact same seer that has seen your life through your eyes. And that every person, every animal, every tree, I would say even every mountain and river has seen through their own lens. And realizing that seer doesn't die. There's nowhere to go. This is just this timeless place. And when I hold that view, not saying that's more real, how does it feel in my body? And the key too is we can often look for this solidity maybe in those more, I guess, free thinking expansive views like I am deathless, and that can easily become our new ground to stand on. But then we're subtly denying the fact that this body will become dust, and what has been here now will not be here forever. And the freedom in my experience comes from not holding to either of these views, but holding them both. When you're not holding either as solid truth, you're kind of floating in the middle. And when you're floating in the middle, you can tap into both. You can realize, yes, I am in this limited body that will soon be gone. and learning how to relate to that and accept that, while also simultaneously finding that immense freedom in a view that is, I am deathless. Where could I go? So it's a huge topic worth exploring, and it, again, there is no, like I said, solid ground. It's listening to how do I want to define myself and the narratives that are playing on in my life.
You bring up so many good things here. And before I shift into this topic of death, right, that you and I have gone pretty deep on and I want to dive into here today, I'm curious, like, because you and I, we have experience here. We have experience looking at our stories. We have experience stepping into being objective or zooming out and being able to, like, take these apart.
Yeah.
Is there something that you would invite others into or recommend if they're just starting out in this journey of looking at their stories and looking at their narratives? Like, what would you say to them?
I would say, first off, this is generally very difficult work, because the narratives, a lot of the time, if they're very solid, they can be painful. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's an element of inviting a sense of gentleness and compassion to the stories we have cultivated largely unconsciously. So, in order to bring a sense of more fluidity to our experience and to our stories, we have to relate to them in a gentle way. Because when we're being harsh, interestingly, we're reaffirming that these are solid narratives and these are objectively how it is. And this is a subtle thing that's going on, is when there is harshness, what am I being harsh towards? It's some sense of solidity. I cannot be very harsh to something that's very fluid because it can move. So again, first step is that gentleness. It's real, just asking the question, what are my stories? What, because a lot of the time it's unconscious. So what am I saying about myself and the world that is playing in my mind right now, maybe unconsciously, bringing that to the surface, and using things like psychedelics or meditation if they're useful, or just journaling, sort of activities like that. Like, what are my assumptions that I've just maybe taken as facts for most of my life? Just asking that question, and there is no right or wrong. And there really is no right or wrong. That's the beautiful thing. And just approaching it with gentleness, seeing what am I telling myself right now, and then going from there. Going from there, you can ask questions like, "Is this story real?" And then, "How do I know?" Asking these questions, how am I so certain that this is how it is? And again, there's no wrong answers, and you can totally answer that in a way that this is how I know that this is true, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of the exploration and growth, and just listening to yourself, what feels right. And also this, it should be noted that when dealing with difficult stories related to trauma, these can be extremely difficult. So, like, what we learn in class is this notion of touch and go. If it's very difficult, maybe see if you can bring it into your awareness, whatever difficult narrative or experience it is. Bring it into your awareness just for a second. Touch it, see if you can feel how that feels in the body, and don't stay with it any more than you want to. Knowing that it's very useful to touch into these things, but you don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to hurt your mind. You don't want to hurt your experience in a drastic way. So, baby steps, gentleness, and just asking that open question, like, what are my storylines? Because it's largely unconscious.
I like that aspect of touch and go, and I have experience with that in a different way where it's thinking about two polar opposite experiences, right? And so I almost see, as you're stepping into that with someone, right, having that tool to drop them back into a different experience, right? To like connect them with their five senses, to bring them back into the experience that's actually not like traumatizing and stressful for them. Yeah. And it's almost like you can, by having those two experiences, right, the trauma and the grounding, like calming experience, it sounds like you can kind of play along that line there, right? That balance of, okay, we're a little too far over here. Let's shift back into this, right?
Yep.
Let's bring more of the feel good hormones and right, the parasympathetic response back to the body.
Yep.
And like it's cool. I like what you're saying here around the touch and go, because it's true. Like the longer you stay with this one thing that is continuing to drive your body into shutdown, the less you're actually going to be able to move through it with that ease and with
Yeah.
that like grace.
Exactly. So it's like for me, when I was dealing with depression and really painful narratives earlier in my life, like it's so painful to get in touch with these things, and just but also at the same time, I knew like I can't just live with this pain here. I want to be able to address it somehow. I don't know how to do it. And I thought it was so cool how you just had your cat, because like for instance, little things like that, like having pets, or like calling your parents, or talking to your friends or trusted people in your life. Like these are all ways to resource. And it reminds me, like in yoga, they talk about finding your edge, like the edge where you are getting a stretch that maybe is working your body in a beneficial way, but not tearing a muscle. So there's a line there, and
Yeah.
it's like you have to kind of push it into that discomfort to start to get some movement and some benefits and some change, but in a way that is skillful, so that we're not bringing on maybe a collapse of the psyche, or having like just a shitty time,
Yeah.
honestly.
There's so many ways to integrate those little resource tools throughout your day. Like, actually, funny enough, the whole thing, we both left pillows at the Airbnb that we're still trying to get back. And one of the pillows that I left there is this like square white, like super fuzzy pillow that looks like a polar bear and like feels like, well, I've never touched a polar bear, but
You can imagine.
I would
Yeah.
imagine, right? But I call it my emotional support pillow because it always brings me back to like this state of calm. Part of that is because I've done a lot of work with power animals in some of my trauma healing journey. And one of my power animals is a polar bear. And so it always reminds me of this power animal that is there to keep me safe and to guide me and to support me and to hold me and to hug me and to look into my eyes, to see me, to feel me, to hold me, to understand me, right? And it's just like little things like that that can be a resourcing tool. It can be like a coin. I've seen people have coins. I've seen people use like keychains, or like some people have a hat, or like a blanket, or like a stuffed animal. There's so many different things that someone can use as a resourcing tool.
Yeah.
There's also things like anchoring, where you can like anchor an experience like into a particular area of the body. And so if you're in public or at work, like you can rub that spot and it anchors you back into that like grounded space. But there's so many incredible ways to anchor yourself with different resources.
Yeah. And just kind of learning what are mine. It's another question in this exploration. How do I get resourced? I could take a bath, or for me, I love to move my body, so I could exercise, I could dance, I could go on a run, I could take a cold shower.
The way I love you and the way you move your body, and you are like a different species of human when it comes to moving your body.
I know. It's true. And I think a big part of that is because like earlier in my life, when I didn't know how to work with like so much emotional intensity, it was just my outlet. It was sports, strength training, and running up mountains. And then I discovered things like yoga, meditation, and that just works for me. You know what I mean? And I'm developing more hobbies and passions around that, like playing music, doing art. Like all of these things are so beautiful, and they really help to, again, resource yourself. And again, it's like if you choose to walk that path and start to do the difficult work, then they can be such invaluable tools as you do that. Important.
Super important. I definitely resonate with you in the movement, the intensity. Like before I knew how to channel that, it was channeled into movement, into high intensity sports. And there's that switch that I have that I can choose to turn on. Like I can go really freaking hard and let it all out. And is that actually going to be what supports me in that moment, right? And so it's discerning as well. Like, yeah, you can flip that switch on, and does that support you, or is that actually doing the opposite? And are you engaging in something that's an old pattern, or are you engaging in something that is supportive and that is helping you be aligned and dropping into your body and listening and communicating and all the things?
And it's interesting, learning, especially in this therapy program that I'm in, like any of these activities, they can be so useful and help you resource yourself in really, kind of uncomfortable times. But they can quickly turn into escapes. And escapes from what? And this would be that feeling, that discomfort. And this is where, for me, meditation is priceless in what it shows you, teaches you, and how it gives you a sense of resilience. So if I sit for 30 or 40 minutes, it's a long time for most people. I've been doing it for a while. But naturally, that discomfort comes up related to maybe narratives or interpersonal relationships, some thing I said that I wish I didn't. And I feel that pain. And in meditation, I learn a part of the learning that skill of meditation is learning how to sit with it, how to not get up, how to let it be there. Say that this has a place in my experience. Maybe the fact that I feel bad about something I just said to this person. This discomfort is a message. It's helping to teach me something. And can I listen to it? Can I listen to what it's saying in my body when I feel a contraction in my chest or in my stomach? Do I try to push it away? Do I try to breathe it out? And there's nothing wrong with that. But also, can I cultivate a sense of resilience, saying this too has a place? Because I found through meditation in particular, a big part of the discomfort is the resistance. One teacher named Shinzen Young, he's a Zen teacher. He says, he has this beautiful equation because he's a really mathematical guy. He says that our experience of suffering is pain multiplied by our resistance. So knowing that pain is a part of life, when we love something and it ends or leaves, that is painful. But our resistance to that change, like maybe the high of the summer, of all that social connection, the festivals, for me being up in the mountains, when it gets, when the days get shorter and darker and colder, there's that shift that happens. And it's not so much the cold or the darkness that's painful. It's my relationship to it and the fact that I'm resisting it, because it's like, oh, but that was so nice before, and I just want that back. I don't want this. And that's actually creating a much more suffering-based experience than just sitting with, this is something ending right now. This is something new that is emerging. And just realizing, how much am I resisting my experience when I have this discomfort in my body? How much do I just wish it wasn't there? And again, this is hard to do. And meditation, in my experience, is one of the absolute hardest skills to learn and become intimate with. But that ability to sit with the pain, which when it comes up, there's naturally that resistance, that clench, that tightness. But over time, you sit with it long enough. You just sit in your posture or lay down or just keep it there. Let it be there. It will naturally move through you. You will naturally relax into your current situation, into the current happenings of your life. So it's really, interesting how, again, we're creating this experience with our mind, of the level of how much I'm resisting this experience so much. I broke up with a partner and I just wish I was with her. And then that experience is so painful. Instead of, I'm not looking at the world around me. I'm not becoming intimate with myself. I'm not becoming intimate with the, other people around me. I'm not seeking that connection because I'm dwelling on how much I miss that. And there's something beautiful in the grieving process, obviously, and I want to honor that. But at the same time, when I'm resisting my current situation, we are amplifying the experience of suffering.
Yeah, pain holds so much power, and there's so much insight in pain. And I love that you bring up the understandings of pain through the physical body. And for me, when I started in my work, I was a pain management specialist. I was working with people that were coming to me to treat all these areas of chronic, acute, really intense pain. And part of the reason why the way that I treated was different was because instead of being the body worker that's trying to push out the pain and rub it out, I would invite them and encourage them to be with it and to ask questions and to find out where is this coming from and why is this here? What is this connected to? What is the root? And actually in that, I had a really really beautiful, another beautiful thing, conversation that happened today with a friend. She's also a body worker. And she reached out to me this morning and she says, hey, I've got this thing I want to run by you. I had this, like, she calls them like, what would Leah do moments. And she's like, I'm having this, she's a climber, really intense, like hard working athlete. And she's like, I've been having this, like, just this tension in my shoulder and it just won't let go. And she's like, there's some pain, but I'm doing all the rehab things, like nothing's shifting. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just here. And in the message she sent me, she said, all of this really started around the time that I lost like 6 really close people to me in my life in a very short period of time. And she was experiencing all this grief. And so she's like, I'm not sure what to do. Can you maybe offer some guidance? And I just prompted her with some questions. And what we found was that this experience of grief, the first time she experienced it was when her grandmother passed away really early on in her life. And we started diving a little bit deeper into that relationship with her grandmother. And she instantly was like, oh my God, like this is generational. Like this isn't mine. I'm carrying this. And as we moved through some of the conversation and I invited her to work with her grandmother and with her grandmother's spirit, and just like you're saying, asking questions, like inviting communication, regardless of whether this is a living person or a deceased individual, their spirit, their energy, it is still living, it is still one, it is still all around you. And sometimes it's a matter of going back into that and asking those questions and inviting in conversation. And after this, like, Instagram chat that we had, the last message that she sent me, she was like, Leah, I'm not even kidding you. This is the first time that I have not felt the stabbing pain in my shoulder. And she's like, like just through having that conversation and opening that up, like her body just like immediately shifted.
That is so cool.
It was so insane. I love shit like that.
That is so cool. I mean, totally. It comes back to like that whole topic of physical disease manifests from this dis-ease within our psyche.
Yes.
And mind and body are so inseparable that you can see them easily as just one thing. When I have this dis-ease in my mind, again, which links to a resistance, which is, again, difficult to work with, it manifests then in our bodies in interesting ways. I would love to explore more into things like traditional Chinese medicine, meridians, like that mind-body connection and how it sort of functions at like those deep levels.
The teeth are incredible, like the connections to the organs and
interesting.
Yeah, I've had some wild experiences when I was doing all the body work and the pain management, because I was pulling all these different concepts together. I would have the craziest sessions that I verbally like could not explain to someone without looking at me and being like, what are you doing in your sessions? I'm
interesting.
Like, oh, it's super. I remember this one woman came in, severe tooth pain, like this toothache would not go away. And we tied it into some organs and emotions that the organs were holding. And we worked with the emotions. We moved the emotions. The woman left there without tooth pain, and she never had tooth pain again. Like, there was nothing wrong with her tooth.
That's so crazy. I had no idea that. I mean, obviously all these body parts are connected. I never thought of the teeth as being one of those places.
Big time.
That's so cool. And it's, again, so interesting in this, like, scientific materialist paradigm we're living in. It's like, oh, just go to the dentist. It's like, what about, could this be psychologically rooted? Knowing how inseparable the mind and body are.
You can't disconnect them.
Exactly. And it's like, then working at the level of the mind, like for instance, how someone like Joe Dispenza, for instance, you work first at the level of the psyche, of the mind, and see what then manifests physically in our forms. And it's again, I see this as the new kind of cutting edge of science. I see like energy work, learning the depth of this mind-body connection to be the new precipice, or one of them, where we could go in science when we're not so rigidly in this sort of materialist reductionist view, when we start to open up to things like our imagination, our stories, narratives, on how they're affecting our lives and our bodies even. And it's so exciting just because these conversations are part of it.
Yep.
we're bringing this to the awareness of, again, the collective human psyche, and then these questions get to be asked, and not just by us, which is so exciting.
So exciting. Yeah, the first episode of the Mindful Evolution podcast, if you guys haven't listened to it, it is all about creating global change through a mindful evolution. And I talk about this concept of mindfulness and meditation and introspection, and how bringing that to different areas of society, right? From socioeconomics to the education system to climate change to the government and politics. And I talk about how things could look different if more mindfulness was brought to each one of these areas. And it's so interesting to think about, because it's true. Like, if we apply these concepts that you're talking about, right? This aspect of life and death, of being one with all things, of releasing, of surrendering, of recognizing that you are part of God. Like, God is moving through you. And like, to bring all these concepts into different areas of the world and into our economy could do so freaking much for the way that our world functions. And that's the whole reason for my podcast. Like, taking all these concepts and being able to talk about them, being able to sit with them, being able to take the hat and try it on and toss it to the side. I don't freaking like that one. Okay, great. Put a new hat on, right? Like, how does that one feel?
Yeah.
And through that experience in your body, and through that experience that you have in that in the mental space, how can you create a deeper and more impactful evolution within your own world, and therefore within the world around you?
Totally. Well said. That's I mean, it makes me think. So Naropa is a Buddhist university in Boulder, Colorado. I think it's the only one in the States, actually. But its motto is to change yourself and then change the world. So through the action of changing yourself is the only way we can hope to change the world. And also in Buddhism and with meditative insight, you realize this duality that we experience, as far as there's an internal me and an external world, is a fabricated and, in a sense, a false duality. It's actually one thing. So how I am internally is always going to manifest in the world. And again, you look at the collective human psyche. How are we at the level of the psyche? Because that is what is manifesting into our world. I'm getting chills saying this. You look at how, maybe how something like the patriarchy, how this unbalanced emphasis on the masculine and granting all the power to the masculine has affected us at the level of the psyche. And then, interesting, how are we treating both women and also our divine mother source, the earth itself? We just rip things out of it. We just take and take and take, and we don't think about the fragility of those systems. And now it's coming full circle, and we're forced to reckon with this. And it's like, okay, so realizing our internal state will always manifest externally. So when we are at a state of peace, contentedness with ourselves, that's the most vital work you can do for the world. And it's an interesting shift, because so many people think, I want to change the world. And I had this view forever. And I still do. I still want to have that impact. But the question is then, how do we do it? Do I do it by putting myself out there, running myself into the ground, like spreading myself too thin on so many activities or so many causes, which is valid and it's beautiful? But realize there's such an enormous impact you can have by looking at yourself, looking at the trauma in my body right here, right now, looking at the stories I'm telling myself. Because when I hold that peace, for instance, like you talked about with death, when I'm actually at peace with that, when I'm not living in a state of fear from not looking at that part of life, when I don't have that fear in the background, I can be so much more open, loving, connected, because I'm not worried. I don't have anything to prove. It's the fear is now not manifesting, but it takes strength and awareness to look at these things, these narratives that are unconsciously playing, and how they're, again, affecting our psyche and our energetic body. And then, I think it's so cool to see so many people through psychedelics, meditation, all of these things that are catching on nowadays, and how that is changing people to personal level. And while in a sense, it's like so beautiful to see, the apocalypse is almost happening. The end of days as we know it. I won't say things will end, we don't know how things will go. But at the same time, uh,
There's
taking
death in
that,
everything.
there's death in everything, and it's a beautiful part of it. And basically, listening to the world, listening to all of the pain, what the news wants you to see, all of the fear, and people are getting that message. We're to the point we can't look away, and we're
Mm-hmm.
forced to maybe look at our relationship with this thing called fear, this thing called death, and start to again naturally start to work with it organically and at a huge level. And when we can do that, when I've always thought for a long time, Alan Watts actually said something similar to this. Is the only way that we will avoid the apocalypse and the end of the world is by completely accepting it. If it has to happen, it's in hands bigger than mine. Creation itself is flowing flawlessly. Who am I to say otherwise? And when I hold that view and I can let go, that's when things will start to be in alignment. When I'm not driven by fear, I'm driven by love and presence for this moment that we have. Regardless of how things go, we have this. And I'm getting chills right now. This is such a blessing, and we forget that. And it's again a practice to come back to that.
Yeah, it's such a practice, and especially those dark, challenging moments where you really get to practice that and find the beauty in the darkness.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, our world focuses so much on life. Our
Mm-hmm.
world
Mm-hmm.
focuses so much on growing and living and doing and being this thing, right? This person of
Mm-hmm.
success and
Mm-hmm.
achieving, right? There's always you're reaching for more. And
Yeah.
we are raised through the education system with that implemented into our heads. And then you
Mm-hmm.
think of like
Mm-hmm.
the foreign cultures, let's say, and they literally have holidays dedicated to the celebration of death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We don't do that in the
Mm-hmm.
United States. We don't
Mm-hmm.
celebrate death. We don't embrace death. We don't
Mm-hmm.
we don't develop our relationship with death the same way that we develop our relationship with life.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
Mm-hmm.
that you and I have dove really deep into conversation about this. And I'm curious for you to just like, I'd love for you to share more around your perspective of death and
Yeah.
how you've navigated this journey of really embracing it and getting closer with it to the point where it doesn't have
Yeah.
power over you.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, like you said, so our experience of death and the story that we're telling ourselves about it is, for the most part, pretty scary. In the dominant Western paradigm, it's scary. It's something we want to avoid. And that's a part of it. Obviously, in this biological system, I don't want to die, and I will do what I can to make sure that that doesn't happen. But at the same time, are we deeply examining what is this thing that we're calling death? And uh, I found through experiences with psychedelics, high doses in particular, where these things are unavoidable. These things will come to the surface of your awareness, like these stories we're telling ourselves, like, oh my God, what is that thing that everyone will experience? And no one knows what happens when you die. And it's scary, panic, panic, panic. And avoid, avoid, avoid. Don't look at it. And I realized through many parts of my life, like painful experiences, the way out is through. And there's no other way, actually. The way out is only through. You cannot distract forever. And this life has this fierce grace where it will show you all of the painful things in your life just through circumstances, until you learn to let go of that certain thing. So our fear of death, interestingly, could be viewed collectively. We're going through this change right now. When shit's hitting the fan, we're relating to what is this thing called death. So for me, it was also in intense meditation retreats when you're sitting with your mind for 8 hours a day for a week, not speaking to anybody. These stories become clear. What am I telling myself about this? And am I so sure about this? When I'm, again, with meditation and psychedelics, both of them, you get to see it and experience that pain. And it can be intense and very painful. And if you let it be there, you can let the energy move. When there's that contraction in me, for instance, it's energy. That energy has accumulated, and I can learn to work it through my system. For instance, for me, uh, up the channels, the central channel, and out through tears, sobbing about, hey, maybe this is a part of life. This will end, and that is sad because I love this place. not looking away from that. I love this place and it has to end. And it's giving me chills again. It's so beautiful, connecting me to this moment that I have now. And only when I was able to move that energy, accept that narrative, accept the fact that things will end. Everything that I love will someday come to an end. And it's beautiful when you can let it, when you can look at it close enough to let it do its work on you, to move that energy through you, accept it for what it is. And then you can start to examine it and be like, what is this thing called death? All these Eastern traditions have a different lens on it. Buddhism has a certain lens. Christianity has a certain lens. Judaism has a certain lens too on what happens when we die. And then you can work at the re-enchantment level of changing my story and relationship to it. Something that we talked about earlier was a meditative approach to death, understanding how the mind creates this story called death. And that is linked to the fabrication of life. So when we say that we are alive right now, which is not an objective reality in meditative experience, you will see that. It's a story that we're telling ourselves, that this is life. It's a concept and a label. When you realize that I've created a life, you have to create a death. It's a duality. And it's like when I create an up, when I say there is an up, I've actually simultaneously created a down. When I've created an inside, I've simultaneously created an outside. And this is just a mechanism of how the mind works. When I create a life, I've created a death. But yet that does not objectively exist. It's just a label and a concept. So when we realize that, what happens when I don't call this life? Is there even a death? Is this just maybe a timeless, infinite, eternal moment that we're living in right now? And just seeing how the mind is creating, fabricating our experience and learning, again, this is where the re-enchantment is so like fun, nourishing, and deeply fulfilling, because I can learn the mechanisms of my mind and learn what are the stories, what are their impacts, and what do I want to feel. So it's so interesting just to become aware of this is what my mind is creating right now, and how our culture is reaffirming that by everyone you interact with, for the most part, is holding that view. And just little things will impact you and kind of reaffirm that belief. And then the practice of coming back to, is this true? Is this real? Looking at this narrative and holding it, and maybe looking at it long enough to poke the holes in it. I remember I took an intro to logic course in undergrad, and the professor, some Greek philosopher, said that we don't look back on infinite time before us with any sort of fear or apprehension at all. Why is it then that we look towards the infinite time ahead of us with so much fear? It's kind of the same thing. So it's just like you can start to build these certain narratives that really change things, and how that fear of death is so central. It's so central in our whole experience. It's like the whole YOLO mentality. So go out and get it. And there's something beautiful about that. But it's like, for me, I didn't like how much of a cage it felt. Because, yeah, it felt kind of limiting. And now that I have such a different view on it, I feel that expansiveness. I feel that freedom to work with my narratives and my stories in this place right here and right now. And how that can go so deep. And really, really the only way to do that is, again, to become intimate with the current narratives that we're telling ourselves. And so what is death? Who told it to us? Where did we learn it? What does it feel like? And let that pain sink. Because a lot of this, I think, is unprocessed pain. Is the fact that, yeah, death exists and now we're done talking about it. Whereas, this is where something like a funeral can be so beautiful. Or in some cultures, I think it's somewhere in Africa, they do like days of wailing, just sobbing, to move that energy, to move that grief out, to not look away from the death. Because it affects our whole experience. And yeah, it's so deeply rooted. I think it's such an interesting topic to really examine.
No, I love it. And I think it's such an important topic for people to examine. This past year, I did a lot of work diving deeper into my feminine. And I read the book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And this book is just hammers home through these beautiful ancient stories and like tales that have been passed down through generations about the life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really beautiful journey of reading this book and sitting with every different facet of death that this book discusses through these beautiful stories that are centuries old. And there's so much medicine in that, right? In those older stories, because you even said in what the philosopher or teacher mentioned, like, we don't look back on ancient times with fear. And I think part of those stories from the past are meant to help us with releasing that fear so that we can embrace the fullness of the spectrum. Like you're saying, if you're going up, you're immediately creating a down, right? And if you're going in, you're immediately as well going out. Right, and that's a law of physics, right? I forget exactly the words of the law of physics, but it's like, right, with every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. There we go. There's my
I love it.
There's my 10th grade physics. Right, but I love what you're talking about here, and I hope that our listener goes back and they re-listen to especially this conversation around death, because there's so much here. And even for me, like, just sitting and listening to you, prompt us with these questions, it's like there's so much that I can sit with, or more that I can sit with around death. And I know you and I had a discussion around, like, how cool would it be to have like a death doula, like, on the podcast? Like, that'd be sick. Right?
Which I will hook you up with them eventually.
That'd be amazing.
Get their email.
It's like these topics that aren't widely discussed that, in my opinion, are the ones that are the most important to discuss.
Totally. So that is, again, linking back to what we talked about earlier, which is this resistance that we have, culturally speaking. Here in the States, like, we don't, it's hard to see a dead body. When I was in India, they burn bodies openly. That's part of their culture. You will also, if you're out there long enough, you will see dead bodies. It's a part of their culture. And in Buddhist meditation, one of the most fruitful meditations is sitting in the charnel ground. So this is a place where people leave bodies to either burn or just rot if they can't afford the wood and the cremation. And when you are sitting in that place, you see it intimately. And naturally, just through exposure, basically, it's kind of exposure therapy, your resistance to it loosens. And that is something in the States, or in the West in general, that we have looked away from for so long. And when we resist it for so long, we are unconsciously creating such a scary relationship to it. And again, this is directly related to our own individual psyches. When we have darkness in our lives, what is our habit? Is it to run away, distract, or prove yourself in some other way? Or is it to become intimate with that part? Is it to run towards the pain, run towards the uncertainty and how painful that can be? And realizing that it's not the death that is scary at all. It's just that we've resisted it so much. We've created an experience which is this monster in the closet. And when we start to have these conversations and we start to bring up, every being is going to die. I've actually realized that is what makes this life so beautiful. Like the wildflower season out here in Colorado, when
Epic.
The mountains are popping, like, it doesn't last long. These flowers are going to go, and that's like a few weeks or a month, then they're gone. And it would not be so deep and meaningful if they were here forever.
No.
And I'm the same way. I'm the same wildflower. I'm the same stars in the sky. And it would be almost meaningless if they were there the whole time. And it's realizing it's the impermanence that makes this so special. And it connects me back to right here and right now. This is what we've got. Is death coming? Yes, of course it is. And by sitting with it, by bringing these things up, like I said earlier, just by letting it be in our field of awareness, naturally, if we can hold space for it, we are just even passively changing our relationship to it. Where now it's not this big scary monster in the closet. This is something that I am starting to build a relationship to. And this goes into re-enchantment as well. When I can become intimate with death. I can start to um, have a relationship to it, knowing that it's on the way. So when it comes, if I'm lucky enough to see it coming, then I have this relationship to it, and it's almost like another being. I
Mm.
can start to relate to it, like, oh, here it is, this thing that I've been cultivating a relationship to my whole life, and becoming intimate with, and not resisting. And it's interesting doing hospice work too. I was a volunteer at a hospice out here in Boulder, and just seeing how, like, people, when they get very old and they know death is coming, there's a wide variety of ways that people relate to it. Some people have so much resistance and they become sour or quiet or completely disconnected or just angry. And other people, they have this letting go, the being with it, ending the resistance to it, and they are just, you know, they're okay with it in varying degrees too. But this is, luckily, we don't have to wait to be dying actively to do this work. We can do it now. And while I was at a Zen center in Vermont, actually, one of the teachers said, in Zen, we're not walking the path of life. Actually, we're doing the opposite. We're walking the path of death. A goal of this practice is to die while we're alive, while we have this life in us, to experience the beauty of this place so fully. And until we do that, we have this underlying hum of this fear. And like you said, this is a progression of building this relationship and this intimacy and familiarity with the topic of death, with the concept of death, knowing that it's on the way. And even for me too, like, it's easy to say now when we're just talking about concepts, but hey, if I got some disease or I was dying next year, it would be a different story. That's when, rubber hits the road. What is my relationship to this? And we get to really deeply examine it, say, and this is where practices can be so useful. Like, there's one that's like, hey, if I was dying, if I had a month to live, how would I act? Feeling that in your body. How would I call my parents more regularly? How would I treat people if I knew I was dying? And it's so interesting we can do that now.
Mm.
And how does that change your experience? And it's in another Buddhist tradition, they talk about the contemplation of death is one of the most direct paths to deep freedom. And I really believe that's true in some ways.
Mm. Yeah, I would resonate with that. Can just being able to see like how much freedom you can find because through being with death more, because you're then able to be more present and grateful
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
in this
mm-hmm,
moment here.
mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
something too is like, if you're resisting and if you're avoiding and if you're choosing not to look at it and if you're pushing it away, you're not then actually able to process it.
Mm-hmm,
And if you're
mm-hmm,
not
mm-hmm,
processing it, that's how we continue to fuel unprocessed trauma, generational
mm-hmm,
trauma.
mm-hmm,
And it keeps us sick. Coming
mm-hmm.
back to the physical body, it leads to chronic disease. It leads to chronic inflammation. It
Yeah.
leads to chronic pain. It literally kills us.
Mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm,
now you have this interesting thing, right? By avoiding the thing that you don't want to look at and by avoiding processing the death of something, it doesn't
mm-hmm,
even have to be the
mm-hmm,
death of your physical being. You're
mm-hmm.
actually leading yourself faster to death
Yeah.
because you're fueling it within your
Yeah.
body.
Yep.
That's a wild thing to think about.
Exactly. That discontentedness that we feel in ourselves with just the way life is. It's like, and it can be, like you said, it can be the death of this physical body. That's a huge one, obviously. But it's like
The
the
death
death
of
of
a belief, a
a
relationship, a
relationship.
pattern, a
Exactly. Uh-huh.
thought, an
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
experience. Like the death of everything is dying.
Exactly, exactly. And in Buddhism, they talk about what they call the bardo states. So these are kind of translated to transition states. And these are between one thing into another one. And in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, for instance, they talk about these states that we experience after death, after physical death. But you can look at your own life just over the years and see these bardo states from when I had this solid experience of myself, of my relationship, of my job, of who I think I am. When you start to change that, you enter this transition space that is, for most people, extremely unpleasant. It's for me, it's extremely unpleasant. And it's doing the work of realizing, oh, this is one of those bardo transition states. And also, how am I relating to it? can I relax and open into it instead of being like, fuck this, I want to be back there. And which is natural. It's natural. But at the same time, learning this is making my experience very difficult a lot of the time. Can I relax into what's here now? A Buddhist teacher who came to speak to my class recently, Andrew Holacek, amazing. I would highly recommend his book, specifically on Tibetan dream yoga. Really interesting. But he said the whole spiritual path can be characterized by opening and relaxing to what life is giving me right now. At any point in time, it's again not what life is giving me necessarily. It's how tense and solid am I? Can I open and relax into what experience is giving me, showing me? And a lot of the times, again, through changing the narrative, seeing it as grace. These difficult times, when I look at my past, those difficult times chiseled me into who I am today. And I am so thankful I went through that. At that time, it was the, hardest experiences of my life. And then over, the past few months especially, I've started to consciously pray more and say, thank you for the abundance you've given me, for the blessings you've given me, like counting those blessings, remembering them, and then saying, thank you for the difficulties. Thank you for the pain you've given me, because it's helped me grow in so many amazing ways, and seeing that as grace. That is knowing this whole experience is tailored for you. And the painful things and the bad things are actually not something to avoid. It's creation and experience helping you to chisel you into something new, something better in various ways. And then now I pray and I say, thank you for the abundance and thank you for the pain you've given me. And also thank you for the abundance and thank you for the pain that I know is on the way. So then recently when life has gotten hard and it's been painful, I come back to that and I remember, oh, you know what? This is actually what I prayed for. And thank you. And it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it helps to, kind of loosen things up a little bit and be like, right, I prayed for this actually. And thank you.
Yeah, it's so interesting. First of all, I want to, before I speak on that, I love that you are starting to pray more regularly, and praying doesn't have to be getting on your hands and knees and praying to God. Mm-hmm. It's just like God is in everything, right? Mm-hmm. Like being thankful and like expressing that thanks to the world around you. And it's that whole concept of like giving and receiving, right? If you're taking from the world, what are you giving back? Yeah. How can you give back?
Totally.
But something that I think is so beautiful is this relationship that I've cultivated over time by diving deeper into myself, deeper into my work, opening, softening, right? Relaxing. Through that, I've cultivated this relationship with suffering in a way that it's like no one really ever likes to suffer. And it's like, okay, I want it. Because that suffering, like you said, it chisels you. And it leads you to grow and gain wisdom and connect more deeply with the knowledge within yourself, right? That deep inner wisdom that you have. And through suffering, we are literally created and transformed. And so it's this funny thing now where it's like, oh, I don't want it, but I want it, right?
Exactly. Like, yeah.
Which is so funny to be in that space where I remember, in my past as a younger girl, like, life was so hard because I didn't have the tools. Nobody talked to me about how to open and how to soften. I always go back to this concept of, could you imagine if every single student across the entire world who actually, or let's just say the United States, who stands up and says the Pledge of Allegiance every single day in school? What if every single day, instead of being dropped into the Pledge of Allegiance, they were dropped into their breath, they were dropped into their body, they were dropped into tools that prepare them for the suffering? It's just like that one little change. And I talk about this in that first episode of the Mindful Evolution podcast, is like, what if these changes were brought to us? How would it change our relationship to death, to suffering, right? To the world around us? There's just infinite possibilities.
That is so cool. That's such an interesting contemplation. If we just change a Pledge of Allegiance, 30, 45 seconds a day, So what if we did a loving kindness practice where it's like, I am enough just as I am right now. The world is enough. You know what I mean? Just I am. May I be loved. May I be safe in today. What if we did that every day? It's like these little things have a drastic impact on our
Drastic.
lives, and it's like we can brainwash kids into patriotism and nationalism, and that's an option, I suppose.
That's a way.
Exactly. But like it just opens you up to like what would happen if we were giving kids tools or practices early in life to not just be producers and consumers, but to be real, living, breathing human beings and to work with the full spectrum of human emotion, not to push them away, to honor them, to see them in ourselves, know how to relate to each other and ourselves. What impact would that have on the world?
Massive,
Yeah,
massive.
and it's cool. Again, I think this is the beginning of it. This is the beginning. These conversations, obviously nothing's changing right now, but these ideas, as they start to circulate, we can see how these little changes maybe can impact the whole world, so that my kids and future me's, again, future beings that are me in a different body, don't have to experience such a shitty place. This is nirvana. This is heaven on earth. Why is it that we still have people who are homeless? Why is it that we're still dropping bombs on each other? Let's examine these questions. Why really are we doing this? And it's like, does it have to be like this? And also honoring this is part of the learning process. We have to feel this pain. We have to see this pain to make the change. And honoring that it had to be this way in a certain sense. The world had to suck like this in a lot of ways, so that we could make it better, so that we could see how we can change these things. And yeah, it's a beautiful path to be on and a beautiful life to live right now.
It is. And you see that on that individual level, right? It's like through that suckiness and through that suffering, you know, many of us finally get to a place where we look at it and we get to be with it. And I'm starting to like have so much belief in the fact that the world as a whole is ready for that, to look at
Yeah.
our government, to look at our systems, to look at our education, right?
Yeah.
To look at all these, to look at war, right? It's
Yeah.
like if we could do what we're doing on an individual level, on a collective, like societal
Yeah.
level, like what is possible? Is it?
Ooh, you're giving me chills.
I know.
I'm so into this.
I know. Yeah.
'Cause-
It's just, there's so much there. And
and like, yeah.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
And like we said earlier, it's like, how do we change the world? We work on ourselves first. We
Yep.
change these narratives. We embrace pain. We rise to the occasion to see, yeah, the world in a lot of ways is kind of fucked. And, we start to own that. And when I can own that, accept it, yeah, this is the way things are right now. And I can move through it with a lot more agency, with a lot more courage and strength. And that is how we start to change these things. And I like I said, this place right now, this is nirvana. This is heaven on earth. This life is beyond comprehension. So then why is it so painful? Asking these questions so that we can then start to address these things. And I really believe I've had visions of this. They're hard to describe to people. You got to find the right people. But that the world that we are going to exit these bodies in is going to be indescribably different than the world we came into. And I mean that. We're young. I'm 27, and like we're already having these conversations. And
I
like,
mean, look at how fast AI is changing. Like,
exactly.
there's flying cars are apparently a thing now. Like,
yeah, and
You
that's
know?
technologically. And it's interesting now. I think Aubrey Marcus said something similar. That was our technological prowess and advancement is all the way up here, but the level of our conscious evolution, we're still like down here. And if we keep going like this at the level of technology, we're gonna explode.
yeah.
We need to rise to meet our technological prowess with our self-awareness.
We need to
with
close the
our-
gap.
Exactly. Otherwise, it's not gonna go maybe like we planned or like we'd want it to. And this is, again, having these conversations, we can do the work to start to change our world in amazing ways. It's again, I'm so excited to be a part of this experience that's going on in this lifetime right here and right now. That is so difficult. It's so challenging and so scary in so many ways. But we get the opportunity to rise to the occasion instead of breaking down. That happens.
Mm.
But lifting each other up when people are broken, lifting them up to rise to the occasion. Because, like I've said many times, we all have our own gifts inside of us already. We don't need to work to cultivate them. They're our passions, our hobbies, what we love in this world. And everyone's different, and we need them all.
All
So
of
we
you.
need to learn how to we lift each other up instead of having this divisive mind of someone's right, someone's wrong, so, whatever it is, Democrat or Republican or sides in violent conflict. Instead of that, how do we not live from this divisive sense of self, and learn to connect, see the humanity in both sides,
All
see that
inclusive.
exactly so that we can bring each other up. And and we get to experience that. And I think these times that we're living on are intense, and I think that they will get more intense until the collective human psyche learns how to work with pain, work with fear in a way that is beneficial and healthy, and not pushing it away, not being afraid to talk about these things, not being afraid to feel, and learning the skills necessary that nobody taught us, and realizing, how do I A, learn these skills now from my own experience, and B, start to teach these
Mm.
things, teach them to kids, teach them. Like, I had such a hard childhood. So many people did. It's so difficult. And because we're not given those tools, we're taught how to be a consumer and a producer, not how to be a thriving like human being. And it's we get to make these changes, and I'm so happy you had me on the podcast, because this is like how it happens, is
It
starting with these
is. It's
conversations.
exactly how it happens. And yeah, what's coming to me is like learn it and lead it, right? Learn
Hmm.
it and
Hmm.
lead, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Embody it, live it, and lead as an example. Pass it
Hmm.
along, teach
Hmm.
others. And by you simply, you don't have to be on Instagram. You don't have to put all the stuff out to the world if you don't
Hmm.
want to, right?
Hmm.
But by simply learning it, embodying it, and taking action to be it and to soften and to be. It's not always about doing, but to be.
Hmm.
You are going to influence all of the people around you, and they will see you.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if it is in their journey to follow you, they will. Right? But like you
Absolutely.
said, it's like lifting others up and supporting them and holding them. And that's, in my opinion, why I feel the community that we are a part of is so special, because we
Hmm.
do that. We
Yeah,
hold each
absolutely.
other
Hmm.
in a way that no group of friends has ever held me, in
Yeah.
a way that I have never had the opportunity to hold an entire group of friends. Like,
I
dude, our
know.
crew's like
I know.
15 plus deep. Like, in the
So cool.
15 people are just the ones that are here
Totally.
locally, right?
Totally.
But it's
Uh-huh.
like, that is it. That
Yeah.
is it. And so I'm so grateful that I had you here today. I'm
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
grateful for the conversation. Like, I
I
always
know.
love going deep with you, and
Hmm. Hmm.
it's just so it's so beautiful to share in this with you, and now to be able to share this with all of those that are listening right
Totally.
now.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. I could keep talking forever.
I
You're
know we totally
amazing to
could.
talk to. Yeah. We will definitely have more episodes, or I'll have you on my podcast once the semester ends and I can actually focus on other things.
I'm
I'd
excited
love
for
to have you
it.
on.
I'm excited for all the things that are coming. I'm excited to know you. I'm excited
Hmm.
to just
Likewise.
be walking this journey with you. And
Hmm.
that being said, one of the questions, the last question I would like to ask you, if there is one thing that you could pass along to our listener that would support them in taking a more mindful approach to their human evolution, what would that be?
Mm. Ooh, wow. I mean, it's hard to make it all one thing. I would say, I mean, I love the advice that Andrew Holacek said, is being honest with our experience, what is directly happening to us right now with us, and learning how to open and relax and bring some gentleness to that. And at the same time, maybe there can be an element of courage in doing that, because it's difficult to open and relax when things are really scary. And I found courage is the antidote for fear. Is learning I actually do have that strength to rise to the occasion, whatever it is in any of the listeners' lives. Um, there's that ability to have that courage to see it for what it is, and at any level, even if it's just a baby step, that is a huge step, just to take that courage to open to my experience, what is happening inside of me in the external world, open and relax.
I love it. Yes,
Mm.
you are so capable to step into that honesty, to step into that relaxation, that openness, and to
Mm.
step into that courage.
Mhm. Mm.
Duff, thank you so much for being
Of course,
here.
of
I
course, I
love
loved it.
you
Yeah, I love you. Thank
and
you so much.
so grateful for your presence.
Mm.
If anyone would like to find you, I will put your information in the show notes.
Yeah.
But you are on Instagram, Duff Daddy
Yeah, Duff
100.
Daddy 100. That's me. Yeah,
That is you.
yeah, that's all I got right now. Again, I'm in the process of making a website, making a podcast. I want to do like blog posts and post some of my poetry, all that kind of stuff. So it's all in the making. It's just I got 50 things going on right now. So all in due time.
Yeah, and it's a whole process. And yeah,
Absolutely.
as you add those things, I'm happy to add those into the show notes. But for now,
Yeah.
if you guys are looking for Duff, you can find him on Instagram, and I'm sure he would love to dive deeper into conversation
Yeah.
with you. So
Yeah, hit me up if you want. Absolutely.
amazing, Duff. Thank you for being here again.
Yeah.
I love you so much,
Yeah, I love
and
you.
I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Bye.